Welcome to Rising Woman Leaders, a safe space for women to thrive in community where their voices and stories are heard. We're a sisterhood supporting each other to live our dreams and embody the sacred feminine to restore balance on our planet. Join us each week as we return to the unconditional love and guidance of our heart and our womb. I'm your host, Meredith Rom, and I invite you to walk this path of beauty, devotion, and service with us. I'm here today with Rachel Proctor, who is an author, speaker, and second-generation entrepreneur. She helps people turn ideas into successful online businesses. A self-proclaimed market research junkie, Rachel has hit seven-figure sales marks as she's built a versatile and trusted learning resource hub for aspiring and successful business owners alike. Dedicated to equipping entrepreneurs with the skills needed for success, Rachel provides free business training on concepts including branding, budgeting, profitability, productivity, and more. With an emphasis on real-world skills, accessible technology, and holistic learning, Rachel helps students pinpoint their unique ideas and turn them into profitable, life-changing business ventures. Thank you so much for being here, Rachel.
Thank you for having me, Meredith.
Yeah. Well, I would love to hear just a little bit more of what led you on the path of entrepreneurship and how did you come to start your business? And did you start other businesses before landing on this one? And a little bit more of your journey to getting to where you are now.
So for me, the path to entrepreneurship was somewhat of a natural one because I was raised in an entrepreneurial family. So my dad was actually both a minister as well as a businessman. So growing up there in the ministry as well as in the family business, entrepreneurship was just kind of like I was just always around it, right? And so I was always learning. I can remember being as young as like 13, standing in my dad's office, learning how to make a payroll. So it was just one of those things that was always such a natural thing for me. And so that's really how I got into just, again, what I do, especially what I do now, which is what I love to do, which is just being an online educator and a resource for others that are trying to find their path and their footing in the world of entrepreneurship.
Mm-hmm. Amazing. Yeah. And I know that sometimes it can be pretty risky and stepping out to do something on your own. I imagine as you navigated the online world, there was a lot of learning curves and all of that. I'm curious about just like risks that you've taken or moments when you really had to call upon your courage. And just like what that has been like for you and any wisdom you might have for other people who are, because, of course, the times we're in right now, people are losing jobs left and right. And It's an opportunity in a lot of ways of like, hey, that little voice in the back of our mind of, I've always kind of wanted to try this thing out. And so advice on where to start, but particularly like that act of courage to really make it happen. What's that been like for you?
Right. There's so much I could say about that, just that whole spill there in terms of just an act of courage, because one of the things that when I kind of had my reckoning moment, I guess, if you will, because I was always around business, I was always getting the knowledge, although in those moments I didn't really realize the teaching and the training and just the wisdom I was receiving just from being in those environments. But one of the things is that I had to, because my dad had started the business, right? We have a school here in Dallas. My dad had started that business, but it's like a whole different like leap of faith that you have to take when you're digging your own venture and your own vision and idea out of the ground. Like, it's one thing to learn about what my dad was doing or to watch him or to maintain something he'd started. But when I stepped out to do my own thing, it was still like a whole different world. I had no frame of reference because we had a brick and mortar business. So stepping into the online world is like a whole different world. And I know you know that. And many of your listeners out there probably know it's like a whole different world. And so to really like find my place and my footing outside of like what my parents had started was like one of the first steps to really finding my voice and just finding what I could actually contribute to the world in terms of like something of value. And it took me a while to really get comfortable with like my quirks and just like the things that I felt were kind of like weird, like my obsession with office supply stores and just all these things that people find kind of fascinating about me that I thought was so weird. It took a lot to like really, I'm trying to find the word, but more like center myself in that and to ease into that and be comfortable with just being who I was outside of what my family had done at that point, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. And what led you into your curiosity of the online business model? Did you know going in, like, I want to be an online business coach and do this work, or was there a path to find that?
Oh, wow. I wish it was that easy, but it was not. So I've always loved writing. And so I don't remember who it was. I think kind of when I was getting online, it was kind of like around 2009, 2010, 11-ish, when blogs were kind of just popping onto the scene. So everybody was writing and, doing these blogs and, monetizing them with advertising. And there's all these things people were doing. And so I love to write. So I was like, well, why don't I just start a blog? That seems like the easiest thing to do and the low hanging fruit. And so that was kind of my introduction to the online world in terms of like how you could actually start making a business out of just creating content. Of course, back then, those terms in terms of content creation and all of that really wasn't a thing then, but that's essentially what was being birthed at that time. And so I started this blog, and it was just, I started following a few people that were kind of big in that space at the time, like Seth Godin and Michael Hyatt, and there were a few others that don't come to mind right now. But it was still so much trial and error, Meredith, because I still didn't know like how to make it into a business. Like I didn't know the format or the framework that people were using to actually grow their audiences or to, again, just like have a clear direction on like the value of what I was creating. Like it was so random. You know what I'm saying? I just didn't know because I had no frame of reference for it. It was just like, oh, I saw it and I knew I liked to write. So why don't I do that? But I didn't really have a guide at that time to show me, okay, this is what to do. This is what not to do to help me. So I had a lot of trial and error during that period.
Mm-hmm. And what were you writing about? What were the topics?
So a lot of what I was writing about was more inspirational and motivational type things, more specifically like goal setting or productivity, or things like that I was writing about just to kind of inspire people to act. But again, there was no real definite or clear direction on where that led to. People would be motivated, but then it was like they read my blog post, but there weren't really any next steps on how to actually walk a lot of it out. And so that was one of the things that I began to see, as I grew and as I got around other mentors and other guides and just others that could help to give me, concrete information on what I actually needed to be doing. It was really a lot, just like I said, a lot of inspirational, motivational things to help people to actually start walking in their purpose. I knew that was kind of the basis of what I wanted to do. So I'll say this. I knew that I wanted to help people to live their dreams, but I wasn't necessarily articulating it as I am now in terms of specifically in the world of entrepreneurship.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And so much of helping someone live their dreams, making money and starting a business could be part of that. But really it's like, what is that going to give you in your life? And it's like that freedom or that flexibility or that, to use that money in ways for those bigger dreams that you have. Maybe it's to travel, maybe it's to send your child to school, or, so many things that it could lead to. Yeah. And I'd love to hear just like, when did things really start clicking for you? Like, what were some of the tools and tips and things of like when, like, oh wow, okay, this is when you're like, this could actually be something. This could actually be something profitable, or this could be something that I really devote my life to.
You know what? I think for me, it was when I finally started working on my mindset with a coach. It had to do with my belief systems, because even now I consider myself to be very much so a business strategist. And one of the things that I had to realize, even in terms of just as of late, the things that I was sharing with my audience in terms of strategy, if you don't have the belief system to actually go along with having the strategy, you might do the strategy for a while, but you won't be consistent, and you won't really fully walk in your zone of genius to be able to really understand your power in the world and the power of your voice and just the power of the things that come natural to you and how they impact the world. And so one of the things that was really kind of groundbreaking for me was just that. I started working with a particular coach in terms of my mindset, because again, I've grown up around entrepreneurship. So I don't think that there's a business strategy that I didn't know, you know what I'm saying? But I still wasn't really seeing the impact that I did believe that I could actually make. I just didn't know what that block was. And it was totally my mindset and my approach to what I was doing. And so I think that's where I really started to see the tap come on, if you will, in terms of really believing in myself to know that I could actually make an impact. It wasn't just about me making money or selling a course or coaching people. It was about like an impact and a legacy. And what does that look like for me outside of my family or, others around me? Like, what does that look like in terms of my mark on the world? And that's when I really started becoming real to me in that at that time.
Mm-hmm. It's so key to have that mindset and alignment and to actually believe in the things that we're doing. And I can't tell you how many conversations I've had with women just over my career of doing this type of work, of self-doubt, women that like, it's like they have an idea, they want to be putting it out there, but it's like, I can't show my face on social media, or I can't like do the live video. That can bring up a lot of fear. And what would you say to someone like that? Let's just say there is someone out there listening who really wants to put themselves out there, but there's just a lot of fear and self-doubt kind of holding them back.
You know what? I think one of the things that I've seen especially this year with my clients and with a lot of my students that work with me, is that they don't feel like what they can offer is enough. You know what I'm saying? And I guess what enough is very different for everybody, right? But there's this feeling that, oh, well, I just do, XYZ. That's not really any big deal, or I just do this and that's, that comes easy for me. Everybody knows that. But when you understand that, kind of what is easy for you is oftentimes rocket science for the people that you're actually called to serve, then it becomes more apparent again in terms of what your contribution is. And I always tell them, we're so worried because sometimes we may only be a 5 on a scale of 1 to 10, meaning in our industry or our niche. We may only be 5 on a scale of 1 to 10, but knowing where you are on that scale, then that helps you to better be able to serve. Oh, well, my job is to serve 1, 2, 3, and 4, not 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, right? So it's like you could absolutely serve your audience and serve your community well at the level that you are at now, because to 1, 2, 3, and 4, you are an expert, because they don't know. All you have to do that makes you an expert is more than those that you're leading and guiding, right? And so to those people, you absolutely are enough, and you're more than enough to them. And so it's just about, again, reframing what we bring to the table and what we have to offer, and helping them to get perspective on this, because we feel like, oh, everybody's doing it. It's so saturated. And it's like, I'm like, y'all, there are literally billions of people on earth and no one business or no one influencer or no one online marketer or whatever your thing is, graphic designer or whatever you do, like no one person can serve everybody. So we absolutely need the uniqueness and your perspective and just the way that you do it. We absolutely need that contribution.
I love that so much. I think that is such needed medicine to hear this, that because it's true, there are, when we get stuck in just comparison and comparing ourselves to the next person who's like more of a master than we are, more of, has been doing it longer, more experience, more credentials, more followers, whatever it is, we get so hard on ourselves and can just, wipe the table clean or throw away what we're working on. And it's so important to see that actually there are people out there who need what you have to share, and they might not be as far along or even know about those people who you're seeing. Do you ever get caught in comparison, and how do you navigate that in your own business?
Absolutely. I think even as much mindset work as I do in terms of just my daily rituals and my affirmations and just, whatever it is that I'm consuming, I mean, it's still easy to get caught up in that. And one of the things that I do, if I feel myself kind of peeking over on somebody else's paper, so to speak, is kind of how I look at it, is sometimes I will actually kind of mute my social in terms of some of my favorite people to follow, some of my favorite coaches or some of my favorite people that are ahead of me, that I do glean inspiration and knowledge from. But sometimes I will actually mute them to kind of remind myself, Rachel, go at your pace, go at your own pace. Like, this is your space, your honor your journey, honor the people that you're called to lead in your journey. And sometimes it takes kind of disconnecting from that, even if it does provide you with motivation and inspiration of what is possible. A lot of times just that gap is what kind of gets us off track. I know for me, it's kind of like when you realize, okay, there still is such a gap, but again, the gap is for a reason. And again, honor the gap, honor your journey, and go at your own pace. And everything will be, you'll be fine. But I know when I start feeling that, and I feel myself doing that, that's what I do. I kind of mute them for a little bit, or, like I said, just maybe get off of social, or just only on social for posting, or just things that I need to do for my audience. But absolutely, yeah, it does happen. And I mean, it's honestly something that you have to really be cognizant of every day in terms of making sure that you're focused in on your journey.
Yes. That is something that I've done as well and recommend to people. It's just that I like call it putting the blinders on, because if you know what your goal is and what you're stepping towards, and the people you want to be of service to, that it can't, even though we love our, mentors and teachers and those that inspire us. And it's like, there's a time and place for that. And often when we're in like a creative mode, or maybe in more of a vulnerable state, because we're growing in new ways and trying to put ourselves out there in things that feel kind of shaky, and we're not don't have a full solid ground foundation in yet, it can really help to, I like what you said, just mute them and stay focused.
Yep. Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely.
Something I like to ask women on this podcast is just any fears that you faced. If you could think of any examples of like a time when you really were confronted with a fear, something that was a growing edge for you, and you faced it and you motivated yourself to work through it and to do that thing that was scaring you. I'm curious if there's anything that comes to mind, what that was for you, how you did it, how you overcame that fear and began to, and what that was like for you.
Yes. So, Meredith, I don't know if you knew this about me. I don't really talk about it a lot as of late, but I was actually elected to office for
Wow.
6 years. Here in the city that I live in, here in DeSoto, and which is right outside of Dallas. And I was actually elected to office for 6 years. And for about 3 of those years, I served as mayor pro tem, meaning kind of like when you think about president and vice president, well, the mayor pro tem is kind of like the vice president or second in command. Mm. And last year, I actually ran for mayor. And that was like, I mean, literally, again, it was one of those things that I had no frame of reference for. Nobody in my family was in politics. Like, even the fact that I was in office for 6 years was like a huge deal, because I didn't see that growing up. It wasn't anything that was encouraged. It wasn't that it was a bad thing. It just wasn't anything that was encouraged in our household or promoted, because it just wasn't our thing. And so running for mayor, like, even with a small city, and I think with the small city the size of ours, it was a really scary thing in terms of having to know why you were doing it. Because there was a lot of opposition just based on the person that I was running against, and a lot of the things, and I won't get too much into that, but it was really a time for me that, when I say, finding what I found my voice, like, I really found my voice, because it was one of those things where, like, there was no middle of the road at any point. And when if you know anybody who's ever ran a campaign, or if you've ever done one, like, it is literally exhausting. And so to do it and not be sure about why you're doing it is just like, would be totally insane. And so one of the things that really helped me to get through that, and one of the things that I came out with, because I didn't win, but I do believe, even though I didn't win at the polls, I won big in terms of me developing personally and walking into my true power and finding my true voice. Because it was one of those things where, again, you have to know what you believe. You have to know why you're doing it. And a lot of times there were moments where I literally felt like I was on an island by myself, because there were people, of course, there's always going to be people that are excited for you and, oh, I'm with you and this and that. And then when you need them, it's like, you turn around and nobody's behind you. And so it was like one of those things. And that was a lot of the time. And it really helped me to, again, be able to find my voice and find my place of power and amplify my voice, and not be afraid to, like, really, really, really say what was on my mind and say what I felt about it, because you had to say it over and over and over and over again, because we were always having, debates. And I mean, so I had to really know what I was fighting for. And if I could do it all over again, well, I won't use that. I won't say if I could do it all over again, but I guess if I could get the lesson all over again, I would to get that lesson, I absolutely would do it all over again, because it was one of the things that I look at today and I'm like, wow, you did that. Like, you didn't have any frame of reference. A lot of times you didn't get the support that you thought you needed, or that you might have needed, and you did it anyway, and you found your voice, and your voice was able to be amplified. And so that was really huge for me. And I think about it, and I'm still, like, even talking about it now. I hadn't talked about it in a while. So, like, some emotions are coming up for me, not necessarily bad ones, but just kind of like, just feeling like, wow, you did that,
Yeah, that is so powerful. It makes me think about when I was first starting out in my business. I really was holding this dream of publishing a book, and it felt so big and so, like, I had no idea what the steps were to do it, but it was so clear, the guidance of just like, this needs to happen. And actually, it took 7 years to get from idea to publication, but it happened. It happened in 2017. It was published. But the one of the things that really helped me in doing it was like, this does not need to be some New York Times bestseller. Like, we just need to, even if one person reads it and it helps that one person, like, that's going to be enough. And then the other thing was just looking back on it, how much I learned, and just to see it as a learning journey. That was a total success. Like, the people I met, the ways I put myself out there, and I did this big fundraising campaign. All of it was just like so vulnerable, but I like learned so much and gained so much of that strength and like inner power of just like believing in myself through that journey. And then ultimately, you know, the book did reach a lot of people, and I do get messages sometimes of people, I found your book, and that was just, that's so important to remember, that sometimes we receive these nudges and these guidance, and it's not necessarily about winning or what we think the outcome should be, but it's more about what you're going to learn on that journey.
I love what you said, and that's the perfect way to put it, is that this is a learning journey. And when you realize that it doesn't have to be this big thing, you know, like you said, this New York Times bestseller, or this, you know, this whatever our thing is, right, that we feel like there was something that I posted a video last night about dealing with just how to stop the fear, or how to conquer the fear of starting small. And so I typically, whenever somebody comments on one of my videos, one of my questions will kind of always be like, what resonated with you the most in the video, or like, what was like your biggest takeaway? And I was just like, I was almost kind of like a beaming parent, or when one of my, she's kind of like one of my students, she's been around a while. And one of her things, and it just made me think of it as you were talking about that, is that she said, I'm realizing now that helping the one is just as powerful with helping the 100, meaning that one could go on to touch 100 or 1,000. And so your impact is flowing, you know, through even that one. And so a lot of times we're worried about the 1,000 or worried about the 100, when our impact could reach and go just as far, even with us just impacting the one, because that one could go on to impact thousands.
Wow. That puts things in a perspective. Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you for sharing that. Yeah, there is a lot of potential we have in being of service and staying true to that service, and not focusing as much on the numbers and the things that are kind of more patriarchal conditioning is wanting us to focus on. You know, it's coming back to me, actually. I'm curious, a question that popped up earlier when you were speaking about running for mayor. I'm curious, what at that time, what was your why? Why was that important to you? What were you holding that got you through those hard times?
Well, I would say that just being in an elected position, realizing that you are a representative of the people, and that the decisions that we make as elected leadership are the decisions that our constituents have to actually live with. You know, it's not just about us holding these titles or these positions, but like these impact people's lives. And a lot of times, especially on the local level, they will impact their lives faster than anything that they're doing in Washington, D.C., or even on the state level. Like, they could impact that person as soon as tomorrow. And when you realize that type of responsibility, when you step into that role, it gives you a whole different level of seriousness, or just responsibility, that like, this is not about this isn't about you at all. And so I was seeing a lot of things, especially in our community, because our community is predominantly African American, and I was seeing a lot of things, even just with leadership, that just to me weren't right. Some of them, I don't necessarily believe that a lot of it was necessarily malicious in terms of like intentional malice people were trying to cause, but it was just like, okay, we've got to do better. My mom still lives in that community, you know, lots of friends, you know, people that I love. And again, just over the years, learning your constituents and meeting people. And it was like, we have a bigger responsibility, and a lot of those things in terms of like the economic development and things that really honestly needed to be fought for. I didn't see anybody standing up and fighting for that, fighting for the economic equality to be brought to our communities. And just a lot of the things in terms of like, what is the future of our community? What will our community be in the next 10 years? What will it be in the next 25 years, the next 50 years? Because I'm so big, Meredith, on like our legacy and like the fact that realizing that what we do now, again, it impacts those people that are coming up after us. And so I just didn't see that happening in our community. And it just became a passion point for me in terms of saying, okay, you know, this is what I want to focus my energy on. This is what I want to give my time to in this season of my life. And this is what I want to give some energy to in this moment in my life.
Mm-hmm. That's so powerful. Thank you. Yeah, I'm glad that you took those steps. And it's, I recently watched a movie. It was actually about all these women that were running for office. I think it was called Taking Down the House.
Yes, I've seen that.
Yeah, and Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, she said, like, we need 100 of us to run for one of us to win.
Mm-hmm.
And like that landslide of just like, oh, that was so powerful to hear, just that it is making a difference, and you taking that step and running for office, like just made it so much easier for the next woman that's eventually going to, you know, take that stand as well.
Absolutely, because it brought a lot of things that we were trying to sweep under the rug in my community. It brought it to light. So it's like, now you can't ignore it. Like you may not do anything about it, but you can't say, you can't ignore it at this point. Like it is out there, like this is the deal. And I felt good about that. Like, again, it wasn't even, of course, in the moment. Yeah, I had my moment because the goal, in my opinion, as far as what I knew in that moment, was to win. Like that's the goal. You win and you get in here and you make these changes. But I can now say, just having some time to step away from it and to pull back, that goal actually still to a degree was achieved, because it's like, okay, you know, you put it out there and now the community's more aware. Now the community's more vocal, and now the community felt more empowered to hold our elected leadership accountable. And so, yeah, I didn't win, but I do believe that progress was made, because now we're seeing, again, just our community do better in terms of, like I said, holding leadership accountable for what we're supposed to be doing while we're in that position.
Yes. Yes. When you went through that experience, were there times when people were kind of hating on you or wanting to take you down or being trolls or...
Oh, absolutely. Yes. From day one, like literally from the day that I filed for that position, I got a really nasty letter. Like I got plenty of like nasty letters and DMs, and because my opponent was much older than me. So they felt like, well, you should just wait your turn. You're young. You should just wait your turn. And I'm like, what does that even mean? You know, like, what does that mean? And it was a lot of that, Meredith. It was like, you should just wait. You know, you guys are you young people are so ambitious and you don't know enough. And I'm like, you know, it just was a lot of that. Like from day one, it was a lot of that. And it came from people that I least expected it to come from. And that was kind of the thing. It was like, wow, you know, you really find out how people feel about you, and not even really how they feel about you. I think sometimes it's about how they feel about themselves, because they, you know, I'm trying to see how to put this. It almost showed me, like I said, how they feel more about themselves than they necessarily feel about me, because it was like, you shouldn't do that. You should stay in your place. And it's like, who gets to determine that? like where my place is,
Yes. I see this as another fear just in people stepping out on social media or starting their business. It's like, oh, if I'm going to be this figure, people might attack me. And that's a reality. Yeah, that might happen. Someone said to me once, such a good reminder, hurt people hurt people. Mm-hmm. People that are hurting are the ones that are saying these mean things. And I think it was just today I saw a comment on someone I know who has posted a beautiful video, and someone wrote on it like, wow, you're really something, in not in a good way. And and then I saw the comment thread underneath it, and it was just like, the person who made the post just responded so openly and vulnerably, like, wow, when you share that, I feel, I notice shame come up. I notice a feeling, the inner critic voice of, you maybe shouldn't be sharing this, or not good enough, or all of that. And then it was like her just standing in that, like, and she was like, thank you for bringing that up in me so that I could look at it and heal it even more fully. And the person who made the mean comment was just like, I didn't mean to be negative. I just lost my house. I haven't had work in a year. I've been like, just shared all the things that she's going through. And it was just like, whoa, such an interesting, beautiful, like, example of sometimes people unconsciously or consciously, are taking others down, but deep down it's because they're the ones that are hurting.
Mm-hmm. I heard someone say this the other day. I was listening to a podcast and they said broken glass cuts. And I was like, wow, that's so true. And like I said, it's just one of those things that, when you put yourself in a position to be out there and to really harness your voice and your power, there are going to be people out there that say things and do things. And you've got to know, intrinsically who you are. And when you own those things, like she said, when you own that place of you that may still need healing, or areas where you've realized that maybe this is a place for me where I can do better, or it may be that you've gotten past it and it's a part of your past, right? But that's the thing, that we don't realize how much power, and it's not that and let me say this, that you go back to your past, because I always tell my students this when they're looking to find like what that thing is, like, what is my niche? Because I say your niche actually finds you in terms of like what your experiences are and what your skill sets are. And one of the things that I do is I say, hey, go back to your past and like see what moments in your life, almost like a movie reel, right? Like, what were the climactic points in your life that really shifted who you are today? And who did you have to become, or what skills did you have to acquire to actually get through that to be who you are today? And it's not to go back to your past to revel in it or to wallow in it, because you can't change your past. But your past is actually something that you can use to show you and be a guide to what you're supposed to be doing now. You know what I'm saying? And I always say that we're to be like a tour guide for our audience. And what that means is that, like, you have your travel agents. Like, when you think about that naturally, you have these travel agents that you may go to them to like send you somewhere, but they're sending you places oftentimes they themselves have never been before. So when you get to the location they send you to, there's a chance that you get lost. There's a chance that you won't know the way around because there's nobody there with you to show you the way. And you see a lot of travel agents online now, on Instagram and on all these social media. They're trying to create this persona and trying to send people places that they themselves have never been. But when you have a tour guide, like when you've had a great tour guide, they're always out front. They're with you on that journey, and they can tell you the shortcuts. They can tell you the history of that place because they've been there time and time again. And so I always tell them, how can you use your past and the things that you've experienced and what you learned through that to become that tour guide? Because generally the people that we're called to lead in community and in our audience and in our business are generally just previous versions of ourselves. And so when you know that you are a tour guide and you're using the experiences that are unique to you, a lot of times that helps you even in those moments when imposter syndrome creeps in or feelings of inadequacy, because your past can show you how it qualified you to do what you do now. Mm-hmm. And so that's one of the things that I really am really big on. It's just like looking at like what has qualified you. And when you have those moments, because we literally have hundreds, if not thousands of thoughts, maybe on a daily or weekly basis that absolutely don't serve us. And so it's about how are you going to respond when you have those thoughts, and to be able to pull on your past to say, okay, yes, that did happen, or this was my reality at one point, but it allowed me to gain this experience, or it allowed me to become stronger in this area. So I feel qualified to do what I'm doing. And you can step into that power even in those moments when maybe an outside voice or an inner voice tells you that you shouldn't.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, something I wanted to ask you about is just how your faith plays into being an entrepreneur in your business. And I feel like it's so woven into everything you're saying and how you speak and hold yourself. And I'd love to hear more just underneath what that relationship is like for you.
You know what? I think my faith is kind of the framework that I've built my business on, because of the fact that it shapes my worldview. I don't believe that there's a separate set of values that you have in business and a separate set of values that you use when you're in church or at your ministry. I believe that those things should mesh, and, how you treat somebody, in one place is how you should honor and treat people in another. And I think that my faith really serves as a compass for how to serve and lead others well. And so it really is like it's woven into everything that I do. And it's not even about so much of the things that we think about when we think about faith, or for me, church, it's not even about those, but it's just about the principles that guide our faith and that our faith is built on. My faith is built on. And it's one of those things that absolutely, Meredith, it is woven into everything that I do, because again, it just shapes it's my compass on how to lead and serve others well in the world. And that's what I use to guide me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It's such an intuitive journey. Mm-hmm. All the decisions, like you said, just having that foundation and that framework. And I think for me too, if I didn't have a spiritual practice in some form, and to really see like my challenges as gifts and growth, it would be very hard to navigate the path of entrepreneurship. Yeah. Well, I'd love to hear as well, just any wisdom you have to share around Black Lives Matter, and just bringing Black business owners, entrepreneurs to the forefront, and educating them on how to build like their generational wealth, and anything on that topic of just, we're in such a time of change and there's so much opportunity. And I know that a lot of people out there that might be feeling like, things have been unequal for a really long time, that tides are shifting. And I'd love to hear your thoughts on that.
Absolutely. And this is very important for me because of just the fact that, representation matters, and to see somebody that looks like us, again, to be that guide through a lot of these places where a lot of people are now seeing the importance of. And I don't believe that everybody is called to entrepreneurship in terms of what we generally think and what we obviously think a lot of times when we think of entrepreneurship. But I do believe that when we talk about our lives and leaving a legacy, I believe that we can have an entrepreneurial mindset in terms of how we live our lives, and in terms of how we invest, or again, in terms of the things that we do. And so that's been super important for me, even throughout a lot of this, because even in my world, meaning like the online marketing world and all of that, you don't see a lot of people of color in terms of when you think of that landscape and just kind of some of the more common names. You don't really see a lot of people of color in representation. And I think it's important, and I try to share this as much as I can. I think it's important that we understand that, people that are where we aspire to be or people that are ahead of us, there's no secret formula, right? A lot of times it's just about the education gap and not having access to the information. And so that's why it's been really important for me, especially this year when I launched what I call my free training Fridays, is to be able to be a resource for my community and be a resource for the people that follow me and that are looking to either add that additional stream of revenue or looking at ways to build legacy or to get into investing and just all of the things that we typically don't talk about, especially in the African American community. We don't really, it's not one of those things that are just common knowledge. And I can even think about growing up in my own household. Like, we didn't talk about money. We didn't, even though we were, had a business and we had these things like finances and money and investments and just all of those things, we didn't talk about it. And so now that I've been blessed to be exposed to a lot of the knowledge and just even in my own life, it's been just so important for me to try to continue to position myself to give as much of that away to my community as possible. And so absolutely, it's one of those things that, wealth, the knowledge is the wealth, right? You've got to get the knowledge, you've got to get the education. And a lot of times what holds people back is that they just don't see anybody that looks like them, or they don't feel represented, or they don't feel permission to get it. You know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
And so that's why it's been so important for me to make sure that I'm doing my part, even on the scale of wherever I am on that scale, making sure that the knowledge that I do have is accessible.
Yeah. Yeah. And just thinking about the girls growing up and seeing you or seeing someone that looks like them and being like, wow, this is possible. Each of us have that opportunity to be just kind of blazing those new trails and helping the way for those who are to come. Yeah. I would love to hear just what's coming up in your business. What are you excited about? What, any offerings you have right now for anyone listening to dive deeper?
Sure, absolutely. Well, one of the things that's kind of ongoing for me are those free trainings. And so they're every Friday. And of course, generally I keep whatever's on the schedule, that you can always find that on my website. And again, those free trainings are just that. They're absolutely free. Anyone's welcome to attend. And I try to make the trainings as no fluff as possible, meaning that when you attend the trainings, you will actually be able to walk away that day and implement and have something tangible that you can implement in your life or in your business. And so we're always doing that. I'm super excited too that I'm starting one of my first cohorts of the Tour Guide Lab, which kind of speaks to what I mentioned in terms of the analogy that I used with the travel agents versus the tour guides. And so it's a place where I am going to be working hand in hand with my students to actually take what they already know and what they already have in terms of their skills or expertise, and helping them to package that into a coaching business using what they already know. And so I'm super excited about that. I'm super excited about just helping them to launch into their own personal learning journeys. And for many of them, this will be their first stint in entrepreneurship. So I'm super excited about the opportunity to impact their lives in that way. So
beautiful. And we'll include your website and Instagram and links in the show notes so people can find where to find you and all of that.
Awesome.
Do you have any closing words before I lead us in a short prayer to end this conversation today?
Well, I guess if I could leave something here on the podcast, it would just be to reiterate what we've been sharing, which is just to step into your power, like own your voice, and to really really just sit and reflect and dig deep on what has made you you, and use that to amplify your voice, because the world needs it. I mean, at the risk of sounding like a cliche, the world literally absolutely needs it. And impacting that one is just as impactful as impacting the 100. So don't be afraid to start small.
Yes. Yes. So I'm just closing my eyes for a moment, invite you as well, and we'll just tune into the body, the breath. Just feeling into anyone listening, any of the gems that just came through and are landing in your heart right now, to hold that with you as you go out into the world, to believe that the gifts you have are valuable and needed, that this is why we came here in this life, to ripple out to all the people around us through our being, through our actions, through our words, through our courage. Just feeling this sense of community, that there are other people, other women who have been taking these steps and being courageous, and you're not alone in any of those fears that you might be navigating. And there's going to be so much empowerment on the other side of taking those steps. So I'm just bringing my hands to my heart with so much gratitude for your wisdom, Rachel. Thank you for being here today. And thank you to everyone listening. Many blessings. Thanks so much for taking the time to listen to this episode. If you liked it, share it with a friend or leave us a review on iTunes. You can also follow along on Instagram at Rising Woman Leaders, and sign up for email updates at risingwomanleaders.com to be sure to receive all the new and inspiring content. Thanks again for being here. It's an honor to walk this path with you.